Celeste Monroe woke up to exactly that feeling on a Tuesday morning in late October. The autumn sun was streaming through the windows of her Harlem apartment, the same way it always did, but something was off. The other side of the bed was cold, which was not unusual since Terrence often left early for work at the investment firm, where he was supposedly climbing the corporate ladder. But the cold felt different today, permanent somehow. She pushed herself up on her elbows and looked around the bedroom. His watch was gone from the nightstand. His phone charger, usually tangled in a mess beside the lamp, had vanished. She told herself it was nothing, that he had probably just tidied up for once in his life, but her heart was already starting to race. The closet door was open. Celeste threw off the covers and crossed the room, yanking the door wider. Empty hangers swung where his suits used to hang, his shoes, his belts, his collection of expensive ties that she had bought him for birthdays and anniversaries over the past 2 years, all of it gone. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone and called him. Straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. A third time. Voicemail. The text she sent was simple. Where are you? Call me. The message showed as delivered but not read. She waited, watching the screen, willing those little dots to appear that would show he was typing. Nothing. Something was very, very wrong. Celeste spent the next hour tearing apart the apartment, looking for some explanation. A note, a clue, anything that would make sense of what she was seeing. His toothbrush was gone from the bathroom. His laptop, which he always left on the kitchen counter, had disappeared. Even the stupid souvenir magnet he had brought back from a work trip to Chicago, the one she had made fun of because it was so tacky, was no longer on the refrigerator. He had been methodical, careful. He had erased himself from her life piece by piece. That was when she thought to check the money. Celeste had worked since she was 16 years old. Waitressing through high school, 2 jobs through college, then 7 years building her career as a software developer at a tech startup in Manhattan. She was good at her job, really good, and she had been promoted 3 times in the past 4 years. She had saved religiously, putting away 20% of every paycheck into a savings account and another 15% into investments. $147,000. That was what she had accumulated through years of sacrifice and discipline. That was her safety net, her future, her proof that a girl from the South Bronx could build something solid and real. She pulled up her banking app with trembling fingers. The balance stared back at her like an accusation. $12.37. For a moment, Celeste thought there must be some mistake, a glitch in the system, a temporary freeze. But as she scrolled through the transaction history, the truth became horrifyingly clear. Wire transfers, every single one authorized with her account information, had emptied everything she had into accounts she did not recognize over the past 72 hours. She had given Terrence her banking information 8 months ago when he said he was helping her refinance her student loans and needed to verify her assets. She had trusted him. God, she had trusted him. The room started spinning, and Celeste had to grab the kitchen counter to keep from falling. Her legs gave out anyway, and she slid down to the floor, phone still clutched in her hand, staring at that impossible number, $12.37, everything she had worked for, sacrificed for, saved for. Gone. Stolen by the man who had kissed her goodbye yesterday morning and told her he loved her. The scream that came out of her did not sound human. It was the sound of something breaking, something fundamental and irreparable. She screamed until her throat was raw, then she curled into a ball on her kitchen floor and sobbed. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, tracking shadows across the floor where she lay. At some point, she pulled herself up and called the bank. They were sympathetic, but ultimately unhelpful. The transactions had been authorized with her credentials. Without proof of fraud, which would require filing a police report and waiting for an investigation that could take months, there was nothing they could do. She called the police next. They took her statement with the tired efficiency of people who had heard this story 1,000 times before. Romance fraud, they called it. The detective gave her a case number and told her, gently but honestly, that recovery was unlikely. Men like this, he said, they plan carefully and disappear completely. By 7 that evening, Celeste had cried until she had no tears left. She had called her mother, who was on a fixed income and could offer nothing but prayers and promises to light a candle at church. She had called her best friend Yasmin, who came over immediately with wine and fury and promises of vengeance. That was when the knock came. Celeste and Yasmin looked at each other. It was nearly 8 at night. Celeste was not expecting anyone, and the doorman usually called up before letting visitors into the building. Another knock, firm and controlled. Yasmin grabbed a kitchen knife and positioned herself behind Celeste as she approached the door. She looked through the peephole and saw a man she did not recognize. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, with dark hair silvering slightly at the temples. He looked to be in his early 40s, handsome in a severe way, with the kind of face that suggested he was not accustomed to waiting. Behind him stood two other men, equally well-dressed and considerably larger. Celeste felt ice water run through her veins. She knew trouble when she saw it, and this man radiated danger, like heat from an open flame. "Who is it?" Yasmin whispered. "I don't know. 3 men. They look—" She did not know how to finish that sentence. They looked expensive. They looked dangerous. They looked like people who got what they wanted one way or another. The knock came again, and then the voice. Deep, cultured, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent. "Miss Monroe, I know you are home, and I know you have had a very difficult day. I am not here to make it worse. I have information about Terrence Brooks that you are going to want to hear." Celeste's hand was already reaching for the lock before her brain caught up. Terrence. He knew about Terrence. "Celeste, don't," Yasmin hissed. "We don't know who they are." "He knows about Terrence," Celeste said, and even to her own ears her voice sounded hollow, broken. "I need to know." She opened the door. The man on the other side studied her for a moment, his dark eyes taking in her tear-swollen face, her disheveled appearance, the knife Yasmin was still holding in plain sight. If any of it concerned him, he did not show it. "Miss Monroe, my name is Lorenzo Caruso. May I come in?" The name meant nothing to Celeste, but she saw the way Yasmin's face went pale, saw the sudden fear in her friend's eyes. Yasmin, who had grown up in the same rough neighborhood Celeste had, who knew the players and the power structures that existed beneath the surface of New York City. "You're—" Yasmin started. "I am someone who has information your friend needs," Lorenzo said smoothly. "And I assure you, I mean her no harm. I am here because Terrence Brooks stole from me as well, and I believe we can help each other. He stole from the Mafia. Terrence, her charming, educated, supposedly legitimate boyfriend, had stolen from the Italian Mafia." Celeste stepped back and let them in. Lorenzo entered her apartment like he owned it, which, given who he apparently was, he probably could if he wanted to. The 2 men with him took positions near the door, silent and watchful. Lorenzo himself walked to her living room and sat down in the armchair by the window, crossing one leg over the other with the casual elegance of someone completely at ease in any environment. "Please," he said, gesturing to the couch. "Sit. We have much to discuss." Celeste sat because she did not know what else to do. Yasmin sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, the knife now hidden but still within reach. "How do you know about Terrence?" Celeste asked. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, which was something. Lorenzo regarded her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "I know many things, Miss Monroe. I know that Terrence Brooks was not actually an investment banker. He was a con man who specialized in long-term romance fraud. You were his 8th victim. But you were also his last, because this time he got greedy." "Greedy how?" "Before he cleaned out your accounts, he was running a separate scheme. He convinced several of my associates that he was a legitimate investment manager who could double their money through cryptocurrency trading. They gave him $2.3 million of my organization's funds. He took that money 3 days ago and disappeared." $2.3 million. Celeste felt dizzy again. That was a number too big to comprehend, let alone steal. And yet, somehow, it made her own loss feel simultaneously smaller and more devastating. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Lorenzo leaned forward slightly. "Because I have spent the past 72 hours tracking Mr. Brooks with considerable resources. I know where he went. I know how he moved the money. And I know that he used your identity in ways that could create significant problems for you in the very near future." "What do you mean?" "He did not just steal your money, Miss Monroe. He also opened several accounts in your name, ran money through them to make them appear legitimate, and then transferred my organization's funds through those accounts. To the authorities, it will look like you were his partner, not his victim." The room tilted. Celeste gripped the arm of the couch to anchor herself. "But I wasn't. I had nothing to do with any of that. I didn't even know." "I know," Lorenzo said, and his voice was surprisingly gentle. "I have done extensive research on you in the past 24 hours. Celeste Monroe, 29 years old, born and raised in the South Bronx. Scholarship to Columbia University, degree in computer science. 7 years at Nexus Technologies, currently a senior software architect. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. Church on Sundays with your mother when you can manage it. You volunteer at a coding camp for underprivileged kids on weekends. He knew everything about her. The realization should have terrified her, but somehow it was almost comforting. If he knew everything, then he knew she was innocent. You are not the kind of person who would be involved in something like this, Lorenzo continued, but the federal authorities investigating the cryptocurrency fraud will not know that. They will see the paper trail, and they will come for you. What am I supposed to do? The question came out as barely a whisper. You have two options. Option 1, you wait for the investigation to unfold. You hire a lawyer, you cooperate fully, and you hope that the truth eventually comes out. This process will likely take years, cost you everything you have left, and destroy your career in the meantime. Even if you are ultimately cleared, the damage will be done. And option 2? Lorenzo's eyes met hers, and in that moment Celeste saw something she did not expect. Not cruelty, not calculation, but something almost like respect. Option 2 is that you help me find Terrence Brooks. In exchange, I will ensure that the evidence of your involvement disappears. I will have the accounts closed, the transfers reversed where possible, and the paper trail erased. When the investigation concludes, your name will not appear anywhere. You can do that? I can do many things, Miss Monroe. Celeste looked at Yasmin, who was watching Lorenzo with the wary eyes of someone who knew exactly how dangerous this man was. But Yasmin gave her a tiny nod. Sometimes, when you were drowning, you did not get to choose who threw you the rope. What exactly would I be helping you with? Celeste asked. You were with Terrence for 2 years. You know him better than anyone. You know his habits, his preferences, the way he thinks. My people are skilled at finding people who do not want to be found, but they do not know this man the way you do. I thought I knew him, Celeste said bitterly. I didn't know anything. You knew a persona he created, Lorenzo acknowledged, but there is always truth hidden within the lies. The details, the small things, those are what will help us find him. And frankly, Miss Monroe, I believe you want to find him as much as I do, perhaps more. He was right. Even through the grief and the shock and the humiliation, there was a fire burning in Celeste's chest. Rage, pure and absolute, at the man who had taken everything from her. If I help you find him, what happens to him? Lorenzo's expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. That is not something you need to concern yourself with. It is if I'm helping you catch him. A long moment of silence. Then, unexpectedly, Lorenzo smiled. It was a small thing, more an acknowledgement than an actual display of warmth, but it transformed his face in interesting ways. You have courage, Miss Monroe. Most people in your situation would be too frightened to question me. I've already lost everything. What else can you take? Nothing, he said, and that is precisely why you are the perfect person for this. He stood, and his men immediately came to attention. Think about my offer. I will return tomorrow evening for your answer. In the meantime, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a black card, placing it on her coffee table. This has my private number. If anything else happens, if anyone contacts you about Terrence or about the investigation, call me immediately. He was at the door before Celeste found her voice again. Mr. Caruso. He turned. Why are you really helping me? You could find Terrence without me. You have resources I can't even imagine. So why involve me at all? Lorenzo studied her for a long moment. Because I have been watching you for the past 3 days, since I first discovered your connection to Brooks. And in that time, I have seen you handle this betrayal with more grace and dignity than most people could manage. You did not collapse. You did not give up. You called every authority, explored every option, and kept fighting even when it was clear you were not going to win. He paused, something shifting in those dark eyes. I have a great deal of respect for people who fight when the odds are against them, Miss Monroe, and I find myself curious to see what you will do next. Then he was gone, his men following like shadows, and Celeste was left standing in her living room with a black card on her table and a choice that could change everything. Yasmin exhaled explosively. Celeste, do you have any idea who that was? He said his name was Lorenzo Caruso. Lorenzo Caruso is the head of the Caruso family. They've run half of New York for 3 generations. He's not just Mafia, Celeste. He's the Mafia, the whole organization. Celeste picked up the card. Heavy paper, expensive, with just a phone number embossed in silver. No name, no address, nothing else. I know, she said quietly. And you're actually considering helping him? Celeste looked at her friend, at the concern and fear in Yasmin's eyes, and she thought about everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. The betrayal, the theft, the complete destruction of everything she had built. What choice do I have, Yas? You heard him. If I don't, I'm going to be arrested for something I didn't do. My career will be over. My life will be over. At least this way, I have a chance. A chance at what? Getting involved with the Mafia? That's not a chance, Celeste. That's a death sentence. Maybe. She set the card down carefully. But right now, it's the only option I have. The next morning, Celeste went to work like nothing had happened. She sat at her desk, stared at her computer screen, and pretended to be the person she had been a week ago, the person who had a future, a savings account, a boyfriend who loved her. But her mind was elsewhere, running through everything she remembered about Terrence. Every conversation, every trip, every offhand comment that might now mean something different than she had thought. He had always been interested in her work. She had assumed it was because he loved her, wanted to understand her world. Now she realized he had been mining her for information, looking for vulnerabilities to exploit. He had suggested they open a joint account 6 months ago. She had said no, thank God, some instinct making her hold back even when she thought she trusted him completely. He had not pressed, had just smiled and said he understood, and she had thought he was being supportive. He had been patient, calculated. He had played a long game, and she had never seen it coming. At lunch, she left the office and found a quiet corner of Madison Square Park. She pulled out the black card and stared at it for a long time. Then she made the call. He answered on the second ring. Miss Monroe, have you made your decision? Yes, I'll help you. A pause. I'm glad to hear it. I will send a car for you this evening, 7 o'clock. Where are we going? To my office. We have work to do. The car that arrived at 7 was a black Mercedes with tinted windows. The driver opened the door for her without a word and did not speak during the entire drive downtown. Celeste watched the city slide past the windows and tried not to think about what she was getting herself into. They pulled up to a building in Tribeca that looked like a perfectly ordinary high-rise office building. But as Celeste entered the lobby, she noticed the security, not obvious but present. Men in suits who watched her with professional attention. Cameras that covered every angle. The elevator required a key card that the driver produced from his pocket. It took them to the top floor, and when the doors opened, Celeste stepped into a space that took her breath away. It was not what she had expected. She had imagined dark wood paneling and cigar smoke, the stereotypical movie version of a mob boss's lair. Instead, she found herself in a modern office that was all clean lines and expensive art. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the Manhattan skyline. The furniture was contemporary and clearly costly, but not ostentatious. Lorenzo was waiting for her by the windows, his back to the room. He turned as she entered, and again, Celeste was struck by the contradiction of him. The sharp intelligence in his eyes, the controlled power in his movements, the unexpected elegance of his appearance. He was wearing a dark blue suit tonight, impeccably tailored, with no tie and the collar of his shirt open. It made him look slightly more approachable, though Celeste knew better than to let that fool her. Miss Monroe, thank you for coming. You didn't give me much choice. He inclined his head, acknowledging the truth of that. Please sit. Would you like something to drink? No, I want to know what you need from me. He gestured to a seating area near the windows, 2 leather chairs facing each other with a low table between them. Celeste sat, and Lorenzo took the chair across from her. I have people tracking the financial movements, he said. The money was routed through multiple accounts in several countries before being consolidated in the Cayman Islands. From there, it was converted to cryptocurrency and scattered again. The technical aspects are being handled. Then what do you need me for? The technical trail tells us where the money went. It does not tell us where Terrence went. For that, I need to understand the man himself. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me about him. Not the persona he showed you, but the real things. The details that did not fit the character he was playing. Celeste thought about it. She had been running through her memories for days now, looking for cracks in the facade. And there were some things she had dismissed or explained away because she wanted to believe in the man she loved. He was paranoid about his phone, she said slowly. He always kept it with him, always face down, always on silent. He said it was because work was demanding, but he checked it constantly. Even at 3 a.m, he would check it. Lorenzo nodded. What else? He took a lot of business trips. Weekend conferences, client meetings, that kind of thing. But he never had any photos from them. Never bought me souvenirs except for that one time, and it was like he picked the most generic thing possible. Where did he say these trips were? Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago, Denver once. She paused, thinking. But his carry-on never had the right tags. I noticed that once. He said he was going to Miami, but the tag on his bag said MSP. I looked it up later. Minneapolis. Why would he lie about going to Minneapolis? I don't know. I asked him about it, and he said it was a layover, but Miami doesn't have a layover in Minneapolis. It doesn't make sense. Lorenzo's eyes sharpened with interest. What else about Minneapolis? Did he ever mention it? Did he have any connection to the city? Celeste searched her memory. He said once that he grew up in the Midwest, but he was vague about where. He always changed the subject when I asked about his childhood. Interesting. Lorenzo stood and walked to his desk, picking up a tablet and returning to his seat. He typed something quickly, then turned the screen towards Celeste. Does this look familiar? It was a photograph of a house. A modest single-family home in what looked like a suburban neighborhood. Brick facade, white shutters, a small yard with a fence. No, Celeste said, I've never seen it. What is it? It is a property in St. Paul, Minnesota, purchased 4 years ago by a company called Bright Horizon LLC. That company is one of several shell corporations that Terrence used to move money. The property has been sitting empty, but the utilities have been maintained and paid regularly. You think he's there? I think it is a possibility worth exploring. People like Terrence always have a bolt hole, somewhere they feel safe. The Minneapolis connection could mean something. Celeste stared at the photograph, trying to imagine Terrence in that ordinary house. It did not fit the image she had of him, the sophisticated, worldly man he had pretended to be, but that was the point, was it not? The whole thing had been an act. What happens now? She asked. Now we continue building the picture. I want you to go through everything, every conversation, every observation, every moment that felt even slightly off. Write it down. I will have my people cross-reference with what we are finding in the financial investigation. He stood, and Celeste realized the meeting was over. One of my men will drive you home. I will be in touch when I have more questions. She was at the elevator when he spoke again. Miss Monroe? She turned. You did well tonight. Your observations are sharper than I expected. I'm a software developer. Pattern recognition is literally what I do. For the second time, she saw that small smile cross his face. Indeed, I believe this partnership will be more productive than I anticipated. Over the next 2 weeks, Celeste fell into a strange rhythm. Days at her regular job, pretending everything was normal, sitting in meetings about code architecture and product roadmaps, while her mind raced with everything that had happened. Her colleagues noticed something was off. Of course they did. But she deflected their concern with vague references to personal issues. No one pressed. In tech, everyone had personal issues. Evenings spent with Lorenzo and his team, going through her memories of Terrence with a fine-toothed comb, analyzing every detail for potential leads. The first night they met at the Tribeca office and Lorenzo introduced her to his team. There was Sophia, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who handled the financial tracking. There was Vincent, a former federal agent who had switched sides for reasons he never explained, who managed the investigation. There was Maria, Lorenzo's personal assistant, who seemed to know everything about everyone and said very little. They spread out photographs, bank records, travel documents that they had obtained through methods Celeste decided not to ask about. And they asked her questions. Endless questions. What restaurants did Terrence prefer? Where did he like to shop? Did he have any hobbies that seemed unusual for his supposed background? Did he ever mention friends or family members by name? What were his favorite movies, his favorite foods, his favorite anything? At first, Celeste felt useless. Everything she knew about Terrence was contaminated by lies. How could any of it be helpful? But Lorenzo was patient, guiding her through the process. The persona is a lie, he explained, but the details he chose for that persona came from somewhere. Con artists often incorporate real elements into their fake identities. It is easier to remember details that are partially true. So they dug deeper. Terrence had claimed to love Italian food, said his grandmother was from Sicily. Was that true, or was it part of the character? He had been knowledgeable about wine, surprisingly so, for someone who supposedly grew up in suburban Ohio. Where had he learned that? Bit by bit, a picture started to emerge. Not of who Terrence said he was, but of who he might actually be. Someone who had spent time in the Midwest, maybe Minnesota or Wisconsin. Someone who knew wine, perhaps from working in restaurants. Someone who had access to sophisticated financial knowledge, which suggested formal training somewhere along the way. She learned more about Lorenzo's operation than she probably should have. Not the illegal parts, he was careful to shield her from those, but the structure, the people, the way decisions were made and information flowed. It was surprisingly businesslike, more corporate than criminal in many ways. And she learned about Lorenzo himself. He was 43 years old, had taken over the family business after his father's death 8 years ago. He had never married, had no children, and seemed to have no life outside of work. When she asked about this late one night when everyone else had gone home and they were alone in his office, he told her the truth. I was engaged once, many years ago before my father died. Her name was Valentina. She was beautiful and kind and completely unsuited for this life. What happened? She was killed. A rival family, sending a message to my father about territorial boundaries. She was 24 years old. The pain in his voice was old but still present, like a wound that had scarred over but never truly healed. I am sorry, Celeste said. I should not have asked. No, it is good that you know. After Valentina, I made a decision. I would never again put someone I cared about in danger. I would never marry, never have children, never give my enemies leverage against me. And now? He looked at her for a long moment. Now I find myself questioning that decision for the first time in 15 years. She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. But something shifted between them in that moment. Some barrier came down, some possibility opened up. She caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she would not notice, and there was something in those dark eyes that she could not quite read. Interest, certainly, but something else too. Something that made her pulse quicken in ways she did not want to examine too closely. She told herself it was just proximity. Trauma, bonding, maybe. She had been betrayed by someone she loved, and now she was spending hours with a powerful, attractive man who was helping her. It was natural to feel something. It did not mean anything. But every night when she went home to her empty apartment, she thought about him. About the way he looked at her. About the unexpected gentleness beneath the hard surface. About what it might feel like to be held by him, protected by him, loved by him. Dangerous thoughts. Thoughts that could only lead to trouble. She pushed them away and focused on the task at hand. Finding Terrence, getting her money back, clearing her name. Everything else would have to wait. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Lorenzo called her at 11 at night. We found him. Celeste's heart stopped. Where? St. Paul, just as we suspected. He has been there for 2 weeks, lying low. He believes he is safe. What happens now? A pause. I am flying out tonight. You may come if you wish. She should have said no. She knew that. Whatever was going to happen when Lorenzo caught up with Terrence was not something she should be anywhere near, but she needed to see him. Needed to look into his eyes and ask him why. Needed some kind of closure, even if it came in the form of watching him face consequences. I'll come, she said. The private jet was another surprise. Celeste had known Lorenzo was wealthy, but there was knowing, and there was being surrounded by it. The cabin was luxurious in an understated way. Leather seats that probably cost more than her car, a full bar, a bedroom in the back. Lorenzo was already on board when she arrived, reviewing something on his laptop. He looked up when she entered and gestured to the seat across from him. We will land in approximately 3 hours. My people have been watching the house. He is alone. Celeste sat down and buckled her seatbelt. What are you going to do to him? I'm going to get my money back, or the information needed to recover it. And then? He met her eyes steadily. That depends on how cooperative he is. She should have been horrified. She should have demanded he promise not to hurt Terrence, not to do the things that men like Lorenzo Caruso were known for doing. But when she searched herself for that horror, she found only emptiness. Terrence had taken everything from her. Her money, her trust, her sense of self. He had spent 2 years lying to her face, making her believe she was loved, making her plan a future that was never going to exist. And he had done it to at least 7 other women before her. Maybe she should care what happened to him. But she did not. Good, she said quietly, and something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. Something that looked almost like approval. They landed at a private airfield outside Minneapolis at 2 a.m. A car was waiting, along with several of Lorenzo's men. Celeste recognized some of them from the Tribeca office. The drive to St. Paul took 40 minutes. They stopped a block away from the house she'd seen in the photograph, parking in the shadow of a large tree. "You will stay in the car," Lorenzo said. It was not a request. "I want to see him." "And you will, but not until I have secured the situation. This is not negotiable, Miss Monroe." She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Whatever was about to happen, she was not equipped for it. Lorenzo and 3 of his men got out of the car. Celeste watched them approach the house, moving with practiced efficiency. 1 went around back. 2 positioned themselves on either side of the front door. Lorenzo stood in the center, perfectly calm, and nodded. The door came down in one coordinated movement. There was shouting, the sound of something breaking, and then silence. 5 minutes later, one of the men returned to the car. "Boss wants you inside." Celeste's legs were shaking as she walked up the path to the house. Inside, she found Lorenzo standing in a small, shabby living room that looked nothing like the elegant spaces Terrence had claimed to inhabit. The furniture was cheap, the carpet stained, the walls bare except for a single framed photograph. And there, on the floor, hands zip-tied behind his back, was Terrence. He looked different, smaller somehow, without his expensive suits and confident smile. His face was pale, his eyes wild with fear, and when he saw Celeste, he flinched. "Celeste, baby, please, you have to help me. You don't understand what these people are." "Don't." Her voice came out cold and hard. "Don't call me baby. Don't ask me for help. Don't pretend you're a victim." She walked closer, looking down at the man she had shared a bed with for 2 years. "I want to know why. Was any of it real? Did you feel anything for me at all?" Terrence's eyes darted between her and Lorenzo, calculating even now. "Of course it was real. I love you, Celeste. I was going to come back for you. I just needed to—" "Lie." She cut him off. "That's all you know how to do, isn't it? Lie and steal and destroy people's lives? How many women, Terrence? How many lives have you ruined?" "I never meant to hurt anyone. You took everything from me. Everything I worked for. Everything I saved. You looked into my eyes and told me you loved me while you were planning to rob me blind." She was crying now, but the tears were not from sadness. They were from rage, from the release of weeks of suppressed fury finally having an outlet. "And you were stupid enough to steal from him." She gestured at Lorenzo. "That was your mistake, the one that's going to cost you everything." Terrence's composure cracked entirely. "Please, Celeste, please don't let them hurt me. I'll give the money back. All of it. I'll tell you everything. Just don't. That's enough." Lorenzo's voice cut through the room, quiet but commanding. He stepped forward, standing beside Celeste, and looked down at Terrence with an expression of utter contempt. "Mr. Brooks, you will tell us everything. The location of every account, every password, every investment. You will return every dollar you stole from my organization and from Miss Monroe, and you will do it now. Yes. Yes, of course. I'll give you everything. Just don't. If you cooperate fully, I will allow you to live. Not comfortably, not freely, but you will live. If you lie to me, if you hold anything back, if you try to run, I will make your death last a very long time." Lorenzo's voice never rose above a conversational tone, but the menace in it was unmistakable. Even Celeste felt a chill run down her spine. Terrence started talking, spilling everything, the accounts, the access codes, the network of aliases he had built over years of running his schemes. Lorenzo's men recorded every word, typing rapidly on laptops, making calls to verify information. Sophia was there, working from a laptop in the corner, tracing each piece of information as Terrence provided it. Accounts in Switzerland, Cayman Islands, Singapore. Shell companies layered on top of shell companies. Cryptocurrency wallets scattered across a dozen different platforms. It was elaborate, sophisticated. The work of someone who had been doing this for a very long time. Between revelations, Terrence kept trying to appeal to Celeste. Kept looking at her with those eyes she had once found so warm and honest, begging her to intercede on his behalf. "Baby, please. You know me. You know the real me. Everything between us was genuine. I just made some bad choices. I was going to come back for you, I swear." "Stop talking to her," Lorenzo said, his voice flat and cold. "She's not going to help you. No one is going to help you. The only thing that can save you now is complete cooperation." "I am cooperating. I've told you everything." "Then tell us more. Your partners, your contacts, the network you operate within. You did not build this alone." And so it went, hour after hour. Terrence naming names, providing details, unraveling a web of fraud and deception that stretched across continents. Con artists who worked together, sharing marks and techniques. Money launderers who cleaned the proceeds. A whole underground economy that Celeste had never known existed. Through it all, Celeste sat in a corner of the room and watched the man she had loved dissolve into pathetic, groveling desperation. Watched Lorenzo control the situation with cold precision. Watched the last remnants of her old life burn away. At one point, Terrence tried to run. He had been allowed to sit up, his hands still bound, and when Marco turned away for a moment, Terrence bolted for the door. He made it 3 steps before Gianni grabbed him, slamming him into the wall with enough force to leave a dent in the drywall. That was unwise, Lorenzo said, not raising his voice. Please, Terrence sobbed. Please, I've told you everything. Just let me go. I'll disappear. You'll never hear from me again. You stole from me. You used an innocent woman as cover for your crimes. You have destroyed lives, Mr. Brooks, many lives, over many years. Did you think there would be no consequences? Lorenzo stood and walked over to where Gianni had Terrence pinned against the wall. He leaned in close, speaking quietly, and Celeste could not hear what he said, but she saw Terrence's face go white, saw the fear in his eyes shift to something like terror. When Lorenzo stepped back, Terrence was crying. Real tears, not the manipulative kind she had seen him use before. Whatever Lorenzo had said, it had broken something inside him. Continue, Lorenzo said, returning to his seat. You were telling us about your contact in Miami? It took hours. By the time the sun was coming up, casting pale light through the dirty windows, they had recovered access to nearly $4 million. Lorenzo's $2.3 million, plus Celeste's $147,000, plus funds from other victims whose names Terrence revealed under pressure. 8 women, ranging from a retired schoolteacher in Arizona to a young lawyer in Boston, all of them robbed by the man who had told them he loved them. Through it all, Celeste sat in a corner of the room and watched the man she had loved dissolve into pathetic, groveling desperation. Watched Lorenzo control the situation with cold precision. Watched the last remnants of her old life burn away. When it was finally over, Lorenzo came to stand beside her. Your money will be returned to your account within 48 hours. The fraudulent accounts in your name have been closed. You will never hear from the federal investigation. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, but she did not know what else to say. What will you do now? Celeste looked at Terrence, still on the floor, being guarded by 2 of Lorenzo's men. She thought about the life she had been living before all of this. The careful plans, the responsible choices, the slow building of something stable and safe. It had not protected her. Nothing could protect you from someone determined to do you harm. I don't know, she admitted. Go back to work. Try to pretend this never happened. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment. Or, she looked at him. Or what? Or you could work for me. Whatever she had expected him to say, it was not that. Work for you doing what? Your skills are considerable, Miss Monroe. Pattern recognition, you said. Data analysis, programming. These are valuable in many contexts, including mine. You want me to work for the Mafia. I want to offer you a position with my legitimate business holdings, a technology firm I own that handles data security for high-profile clients. Your salary would be triple what you currently make, and your work would be entirely legal. Celeste stared at him, trying to understand. Why? Because you have proven yourself to be intelligent, capable, and resilient. Because I believe you have been wasted in your current position. And because... He paused, something flickering in those dark eyes. Because I find that I'm not ready for our association to end. Her heart was beating too fast. She told herself it was exhaustion, adrenaline, the after effects of a very long night. But she knew, even as she made excuses, that it was something else. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. He walked away to confer with his men, and Celeste sat in the morning light and contemplated the strange turn her life had taken. 2 weeks ago, she had woken up to discover her entire world had been a lie. Now she was sitting in a house in Minnesota, watching the man who had destroyed her face justice, and being offered a job by the head of one of New York's most powerful crime families. Nothing made sense anymore, and maybe that was okay. They flew back to New York that afternoon. Terrence stayed behind, in the custody of Lorenzo's men. Celeste did not ask what would happen to him, and Lorenzo did not offer the information. Some things were better left unknown. On the plane, she fell asleep in one of the leather seats, exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced. When she woke, they were somewhere over Pennsylvania, and Lorenzo was watching her from across the cabin. "You were crying in your sleep," he said quietly. "Bad dreams." She straightened up, embarrassed. "After what you have been through, that is to be expected." He set down the book he had been reading and moved to the seat closer to hers. "May I tell you something?" She nodded. "When I first began investigating Terrence Brooks, I learned about you purely as a detail. The current girlfriend, another victim. I expected you to be like the others, passive, defeated, waiting for someone to rescue you." He leaned forward slightly. "You surprised me, Miss Monroe. Instead of collapsing, you fought. You called every authority, you explored every option, you refused to accept what had happened to you. And when I came to your door with an offer that most people would have been too frightened to consider, you asked intelligent questions and made a strategic decision. I didn't have much choice. There is always a choice. You could have refused. You could have gone to the police about me. You could have done many things that would have been safer but less effective. Instead, you chose the harder path because it gave you the best chance of justice." He reached out and very carefully touched her hand. It was the first time he had touched her in the weeks they had worked together, and the contact sent electricity through her veins. "I have known many powerful people, Miss Monroe. Men and women who control empires, who have everything they could ever want. Very few of them have the kind of courage you showed in that living room today, facing the man who betrayed you and demanding answers." Celeste looked down at his hand on hers. His fingers were long and elegant, the hands of someone who did not do manual labor, but there was strength in them too. Contained power, like everything else about him. "Why does it matter to you?" she asked. "What I did, who I am. Why do you care?" For a long moment he did not answer. Then, slowly, he withdrew his hand. "I am not certain," he admitted. "I only know that it does." The rest of the flight passed in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. Something had shifted between them, some barrier had come down, and Celeste was not sure if she should be terrified or intrigued. Both, probably. Both seemed appropriate. 3 days later, Celeste stood in front of her bathroom mirror and took stock of her reflection. She looked different than she had a month ago, thinner, harder, with shadows under her eyes that concealer could not quite hide. But there was something else too, a sharpness in her gaze that had not been there before. She had made her decision. The office building looked different in daylight. More ordinary, just another glass and steel tower in the Manhattan skyline. But Celeste knew what it really was, what it housed, what kind of power operated within its walls. She took the elevator to the top floor and walked into Lorenzo's office without being announced. He was at his desk, on the phone, but he held up a hand to indicate she should wait and finished his conversation quickly. "Miss Monroe, I was not expecting you. I've made my decision." He stood, walking around the desk to face her. "And? I'll take the job, but I have conditions." One eyebrow rose slightly. "Conditions?" "I won't do anything illegal. I know that your business holdings are a mix of legitimate and not legitimate, and I will only work on the legitimate side. No exceptions." "Agreed." "And I want full transparency about what I'm working on. No projects where I'm being kept in the dark about the real purpose." "Also agreed?" She had expected more resistance. The ease of his agreement made her suspicious. "That's it? You're not going to argue?" "Why would I argue? Your conditions are reasonable, and I have no intention of involving you in anything criminal. I told you, Miss Monroe, the position I'm offering is entirely legitimate. I meant that." "Then why me? There must be hundreds of people with my skills who would take this job." Lorenzo moved closer, and Celeste's breath caught. He was tall enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. "Because none of them are you," he said simply. "Because none of them have what you have. Intelligence, yes. Skills, certainly. But also fire. The willingness to fight, to risk everything, to face impossible odds because giving up is not in your nature." He reached up and very gently touched her face. His fingers were warm against her cheek, and Celeste felt her heart racing. "I have been surrounded by yes men and sycophants my entire life. People who tell me what they think I want to hear, who agree with everything I say, because they are afraid of what will happen if they do not. You are not afraid of me. You have never been afraid of me, even when you should have been." "That's not entirely true," she admitted. "I was terrified the first time you showed up at my apartment, but you let me in anyway. You listened, you questioned, you made a decision. That is what I need. Someone who will challenge me, who will tell me the truth, who will not simply bow to my authority. His thumb traced along her cheekbone, and Celeste felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. One step and she would fall, and she was not sure what was waiting at the bottom. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "Probably," he agreed. "But I find that I do not care." He kissed her. It was not gentle. It was not tentative. It was demanding and possessive and overwhelming, and Celeste felt herself responding with an intensity that shocked her. Her hands gripped his shoulders, pulling him closer. His arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly, pressing her against him. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I should apologize," Lorenzo said, though he did not sound sorry at all. I don't want apologies." "What do you want?" She looked at him, this dangerous, powerful man who had walked into her life at its lowest point and offered her a way forward. She thought about Terrence, about the lies and the betrayal and the devastation he had left behind. She thought about all the careful choices she had made, all the safe decisions, all the time she had protected herself from risk. And she thought about how none of it had saved her, how playing it safe had not kept her safe, how being careful had not prevented her heart from being broken. Maybe it was time to try something different. "I want to see where this goes," she said. "Whatever this is. I want to find out what's possible." Lorenzo's smile was slow and devastating. "Then let us find out together." That night, Celeste went home with him. Not to the office, but to his apartment, a penthouse in the Upper West Side with views that took her breath away. He showed her around like any man showing a woman his home, pointing out the art, the architectural details, the view from the terrace. And then he led her to his bedroom and showed her other things entirely. He was different than she had expected, patient despite the intensity of his desire, attentive in ways that suggested he was learning her, studying her responses, cataloging what made her gasp and what made her moan. He took her apart piece by piece and put her back together differently, and when she finally came undone in his arms, she felt something shift inside her, some wall crumbling, some defense falling. Afterward, they lay tangled in his sheets, and Celeste traced patterns on his chest with her fingertip. "You're different than I expected," she said. "How so?" "I expected cold. Calculating. I expected you to be exactly like you are in business, but this—" She gestured vaguely at the bed, at the intimacy of the moment. "This isn't calculated." "No," he agreed. "I am finding that very little about you is something I can calculate." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Is that a problem?" "It should be. In my world, unpredictability is dangerous. The things I cannot control are the things that can hurt me. And yet, here I am. And yet here you are." He pulled her closer, settling her against his chest. "When I first learned about what Brooks had done to you, I was going to simply pay for your silence. Make the problem go away with money, as I do with most problems. What changed? I watched you. That first night after I had discovered the connection, I had people monitor your building. I watched you come home from work, watched you discover the empty apartment, watched you call the police and the bank and your mother. I watched you refuse to give up, even when it was clear there was nothing you could do." His hand stroked down her back, slow and possessive. "And I found myself invested, not in the situation, but in you, in how you would respond to each new obstacle, what you would do next. When I came to your apartment that night, it was not purely about finding Brooks. It was about meeting you, seeing if you were who I thought you were. And was I? You were more. You are more. Every day you reveal some new depth that I did not anticipate. It is maddening and exhilarating, and I have absolutely no idea what to do about it." Celeste smiled against his skin. "Welcome to my world. I've been feeling that way about you for weeks." The following months were unlike anything Celeste had ever experienced. She started her new job, working on security systems for corporations that Lorenzo's technology firm served. The work was challenging and interesting, and she was good at it. Her colleagues respected her abilities. Her salary allowed her to rebuild her savings and then some. The office was in a high-rise in Midtown, gleaming and modern, indistinguishable from any other corporate technology company. Her team included brilliant engineers from around the world, and none of them knew, or at least pretended not to know, about the company's ultimate owner. Celeste threw herself into the work. It helped her process everything that had happened, gave her something productive to focus on. She designed security systems, identified vulnerabilities, built walls that would keep bad actors out. There was a certain poetry to it, she thought, taking what Terrence had done to her and turning it into expertise that could protect others. And then there was Lorenzo. They did not put a label on what they were. He did not introduce her as his girlfriend at the social events she occasionally attended with him. She did not call him her boyfriend when her mother asked about her love life. They were simply together, in a way that defied easy categorization. The first time he took her to a social function, it was a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She wore a black dress that he had sent to her apartment with a note that simply said, "For tonight?" It fit perfectly, of course. He seemed to know her size, her preferences, her style, without ever having to ask. At the gala, she watched him work the room. Charming when he needed to be, intimidating when it served his purposes, always perfectly calibrated to the situation. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, they all seemed to know him, to defer to him in subtle ways that spoke of his real power. But throughout the evening, his attention kept returning to her, a hand on the small of her back as they moved through the crowd, a glass of champagne appearing in her hand before she realized she wanted one, his eyes finding hers across the room filled with something that made her stomach flutter. "You belong here," he told her later in the car on the way home. "You carry yourself like you have always belonged in these rooms." "I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx with 5 siblings," she reminded him. "I definitely did not belong." "Perhaps not in the past, but now?" He reached over and took her hand. "Now you belong wherever you want to be, and I hope that includes beside me." He was possessive in ways that should have bothered her but did not. He wanted to know where she was, who she was with, when she would be home, but he never tried to control her, never made her feel trapped. It was protection, she realized, not possession. He had lost people before, people he cared about, and he could not bear the thought of losing her. She met his mother, Lorenzo Caruso, a formidable woman who looked Celeste up and down with sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. They had lunch at the family estate in Long Island, just the two of them, and Lucia asked probing questions about Celeste's background, her education, her intentions. "You are not what I expected?" Lucia said finally, setting down her teacup. "When Lorenzo told me he was seeing someone, I imagined another socialite, another woman who wanted his money and his name. I have my own money, and I do not particularly care about names." Lucia smiled, the first real smile Celeste had seen from her. "Good. That is very good. My son needs someone who sees him, not his position. Someone who will challenge him, not simply agree with everything he says." "I'm definitely not afraid to challenge him." "I can see that. You have strength in you, girl. Fire." Lucia reached across the table and patted Celeste's hand. "Welcome to the family. God help you." She met his lieutenants, the men and women who ran his organization, and earned their grudging respect through competence and discretion. Marco and Gianni, who had been there that first night, became almost like older brothers to her. Overprotective, slightly overbearing, but loyal to the bone. She became part of his world in ways that were carefully managed to keep her separate from the dangerous parts. And at night, in his bed or hers, they built something private and intense and real. He told her about his childhood, about the expectations placed on him as the eldest son, about the weight of responsibility he carried, about his father, who had been cold and demanding, and his mother, who had tried to soften the edges, about growing up knowing exactly what he would become and never having a choice. She told him about growing up poor, about fighting for everything she had, about the fear of losing it all that had driven her for so long, about her father, who had left when she was 7, and her mother, who had worked 3 jobs to keep 5 kids fed and clothed, about being the first person in her family to go to college, the first to earn 6 figures, the first to imagine a future beyond survival. They understood each other in ways that surprised them both. 2 people shaped by very different circumstances into very similar shapes. Fighters, both of them. Survivors. 6 months after the night in Minnesota, Lorenzo took her to the Amalfi Coast for a week. They stayed in a villa overlooking the Mediterranean, eating fresh seafood and drinking local wine and making love as the sun set over the water. The villa was ancient, built into the cliffs centuries ago and renovated with modern luxuries. There was a private pool that seemed to hang over the edge of the world, and a terrace where they ate breakfast every morning, watching fishing boats move across the impossibly blue water below. For a week, they were just 2 people in love. No business calls, no security concerns, no reminders of Lorenzo's other life. Just lazy mornings and long afternoons and nights that seemed to last forever. Celeste found herself thinking about her life before Terrence, before Lorenzo, before everything changed. She had been happy, she supposed, in a limited way, content, safe. But she had never felt alive the way she did now, never understood what it meant to love someone with every fiber of your being, to want to spend every moment with them, to feel like your heart would burst from the intensity of it. "What are you thinking?" Lorenzo asked on their fourth morning there. They were on the terrace, coffee cooling in their hands, the Mediterranean spreading out before them like a promise. "I am thinking about how different my life is now. A year ago, I was a woman with a boring job and a boyfriend I thought I loved and a savings account I was proud of. Now," she gestured at the view, at him, at everything. "Now I am someone I barely recognize. Is that a good thing?" "Yes, I think so." The old Celeste played it safe. She made careful choices and planned everything and tried to control every outcome, and none of it protected her. She reached over and took his hand. The new Celeste takes risks. She trusts her instincts. She falls in love with dangerous men who show up at her door with impossible offers. Lorenzo brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. The new Celeste is remarkable, but I suspect she was always there, waiting for permission to emerge. Maybe. Or maybe you brought her out. I prefer to think we brought each other out. You have changed me as much as I have changed you. On their last night, he took her to a restaurant on the cliffs, a tiny place with only 4 tables and a view that made you feel like you were floating above the sea. The food was incredible, local specialties prepared with care and served with wine that tasted like sunshine. "I have something to tell you," he said after the wine had been poured and the first course served. "That sounds ominous." "It should not be. I hope it will not be." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I have spent the past 6 months trying to understand what you have done to me, why I think about you constantly, why your absence feels like a physical pain, why, for the first time in my life, I am willing to consider changing everything for someone else." Celeste's heart was racing. She knew what was coming. She had felt it building in every look, every touch, every moment they spent together. "I love you, Celeste. I love your strength and your intelligence and your fire. I love that. You challenge me, that you make me better, that you see me as a man and not just a position of power. I love the way you laugh at my jokes, even when they are terrible, and the way you push back when you think I'm wrong, and the way you look at me like I am the only person in the room." He squeezed her hand. "I am asking you to stay with me. Not as something casual, not as something undefined. I am asking you to be mine, officially and completely, for as long as you will have me." Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Is this your version of a proposal?" "If you want it to be. I will give you whatever kind of commitment you need. A ring, a ceremony, a piece of paper with our names on it. Or nothing at all, if that is what you prefer. All I need is you." She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, the betrayal that had shattered her life, the unlikely alliance with a dangerous man, the slow building of trust and respect and eventually love. A year ago, she had been a woman with a careful plan and a safe life, and a boyfriend who turned out to be a lie. Now she was sitting on a cliff in Italy with one of the most powerful men in the world, being asked to spend her life with him. Nothing had gone the way she expected. Everything had turned out better. "Yes," she said, "to all of it. The ring, the ceremony, the piece of paper. I want everything. I want you." Lorenzo's smile was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Then you have me. Everything I am, everything I have. It is yours." He pulled a box from his jacket pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring unlike anything she had expected. Not a traditional diamond solitaire, but a deep blue sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds that sparkled in the candlelight. "My grandmother's stone," he said, slipping it onto her finger. "Reset for you. I wanted you to have something with history, something that means more than just money." The ring fit perfectly, as she had somehow known it would, as if it had been waiting for her all along. The ring he gave her that night was a sapphire, not a diamond. When she asked why, he said that diamonds were what everyone expected, and she had never been what anyone expected. The sapphire was the color of the Mediterranean at sunset, deep and endless, and it fit perfectly on her finger. They flew back to New York the next day, and everything was different. People looked at her differently now. The ring on her finger marked her as belonging to Lorenzo Caruso, and in his world, that meant something. But instead of feeling owned, Celeste felt empowered. Lorenzo treated her as a partner in every sense. He asked her opinion on business matters, listened to her insights, even changed course sometimes based on her observations. She brought a different perspective, he said, one that had been missing from his world. She continued working at the technology firm, but her role evolved. Lorenzo put her in charge of a new division focused on cybersecurity, recognizing that her skills and her experience with Terrence had given her unique insights into how criminals operated in the digital space. She built a team, developed new products, and within 6 months, the division was one of the most profitable in the company. At night, they came together like two pieces of a puzzle finally finding their match. Lorenzo was passionate and demanding, but also tender in ways that surprised her. He held her after they made love and talked about his fears, his hopes, the things he had never told anyone else, and she shared her own secrets, the wounds she carried, the dreams she had abandoned, the woman she wanted to become. They were honest with each other in ways neither had been with anyone before, and that honesty built something stronger than anything Celeste had ever known. 3 months before the wedding, something happened that tested everything they had built. Celeste was working late at the office when Marco, one of Lorenzo's most trusted men, appeared at her door. "Mrs. Monroe, you need to come with me now." The urgency in his voice made her grab her things without question. In the car, Marco told her that there had been an incident. Lorenzo had been shot. The drive to the hospital was the longest 30 minutes of her life. She did not cry. She could not. Her entire being was focused on one thing, on getting to him, on seeing with her own eyes that he was alive. He was. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, a flesh wound that looked worse than it was. But seeing him in that hospital bed, pale and bandaged, something inside Celeste hardened into diamond. "Who did this?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. Lorenzo looked at her with something like wonder. "Most women would be crying, asking me to give up this life. I'm not most women. And I would never ask you to be something you're not. Now tell me who did this." It was a rival organization, one that had been pushing against the boundaries of Lorenzo's territory for months. The shooting had been a message, a statement that they were not afraid of the Caruso family. They should have been afraid. Over the next 2 weeks, Celeste watched as Lorenzo dismantled the rival organization piece by piece. She did not participate in the violence, did not want to know the details, but she understood that this was part of who he was. The man she loved was capable of terrible things in defense of what he valued. And strangely, that made her feel safer, not less. Because she knew without any doubt that he would do anything to protect her. Anything at all. When it was over, when the rival organization had been absorbed or eliminated and the message had been sent that attacking Lorenzo Caruso had consequences, he came to her apartment in the middle of the night. "I need to know if this is still what you want," he said, standing in her doorway, looking more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. "What you have seen these past weeks, what I am capable of. If that changes things for you, I need to know now." Celeste reached out and took his hand, pulling him inside. "I knew who you were when I let you into my apartment that first night. I knew what kind of man you were, what kind of world you lived in. Nothing I have seen has changed my answer. I choose you, Lorenzo, all of you, the light and the dark." He gathered her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I do not deserve you," he murmured into her hair. "Probably not," she agreed, "but you have me anyway." That night, they made love with a desperation that felt like claiming, like two people who had faced the possibility of losing each other and refused to let it happen. When morning came, they lay tangled together and made plans for the future. "I want to get married soon," Lorenzo said. "Not because I'm rushing, but because I do not want to waste any more time. Life is uncertain. I want whatever time we have to be official." Celeste smiled against his chest. "Are you sure you want to marry a woman who demands conditions and asks too many questions?" "I want to marry the only woman who has ever made me feel like a man instead of a position. The only woman who sees me clearly and loves me anyway." "Then yes, soon. The sooner the better." They were married 3 months later, in a small ceremony in the garden of his mother's estate. Celeste wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers. Lorenzo wore a dark suit and could not stop smiling. Yasmin was her maid of honor, standing beside Celeste, with tears in her eyes and a threat in her heart for anyone who would hurt her friend. The 2 men who had accompanied Lorenzo to her apartment that night, who she now knew as Marco and Johnny, stood as his witnesses, looking proud and slightly uncomfortable in their formal attire. Lorenzo's mother cried throughout the ceremony, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief that had belonged to her own mother. Celeste's mother flew in from New York and could not believe the life her daughter had built, kept asking if this was really happening, if her baby girl was really marrying a man who owned half of Manhattan. At the reception, Lorenzo pulled her aside and led her to a quiet corner of the garden. "I have a wedding gift for you. You've already given me a house, Lorenzo, and a car, and enough jewelry to open a store. This is different." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a single photograph. Terrence in what looked like a prison cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit and looking 10 years older than when she had last seen him. "He is in a facility in South America," Lorenzo said. "He will remain there for the rest of his life, working to repay the debt he accumulated by stealing from dozens of people over the years. He will never hurt anyone again." Celeste looked at the photograph for a long moment. She expected to feel something, satisfaction or vindication or at least closure. Instead, she felt nothing at all. Terrence Brooks was a chapter of her life that had ended. He did not matter anymore. "Thank you," she said, handing back the photograph. "But I don't need this. I don't need to think about him ever again." Lorenzo took the photograph and slipped it into his pocket. "Then we will not. He is in the past. We are the future." She kissed him, there in the garden of his mother's estate, surrounded by flowers and fairy lights and the sound of their families celebrating. "I love you," she said against his lips. "And I love you, my wife, my partner, my everything." 1 year later, Celeste stood on the balcony of their apartment, watching the sun rise over Manhattan. Behind her, Lorenzo was still asleep, sprawled across their bed in a way that made her smile. He was always so controlled in public, so contained. Only she got to see him like this, relaxed and vulnerable and human. She thought about the night her world had ended. The cold bed, the empty closet, the devastating number on her banking app. She had been so sure that nothing would ever be okay again. And then Lorenzo Caruso had knocked on her door. He had not saved her, not exactly. She had saved herself with his help, had rebuilt herself from the ashes of what Terrence had destroyed, had become someone stronger, fiercer, more alive than she had ever been before. But he had given her something precious. A partner who saw her truly. A love that challenged and supported and burned with intensity. A life that was dangerous and complicated and absolutely worth it. The bedroom door opened and Lorenzo appeared, rumpled from sleep, impossibly handsome in the morning light. "You are thinking deep thoughts," he observed, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I'm thinking about how strange life is. How the worst thing that ever happened to me led to the best thing." He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "The worst thing?" "Terrence. Losing everything. Having my life destroyed." "And the best thing?" She turned in his arms to face him. "You. This. Everything we've built together." His hands cupped her face, tilting it up so he could look into her eyes. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this choice, Celeste. I promise you that." "I know." She kissed him softly. "I've never doubted it." They stood there together as the sun rose fully, painting the city gold. Two people who had found each other through chaos and betrayal and unlikely circumstances. Two people who had built something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate lives. And if Lorenzo Caruso was a dangerous man, a man who operated in shadows, a man whose power came from sources that polite society preferred not to acknowledge, well, Celeste had learned that safety was an illusion anyway. The only real security was in having someone you trusted at your back, someone who would fight for you, someone who would burn the world down if anyone tried to hurt you, someone who loved you with an intensity that was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. She had that now, she had him, and she would never take it for granted. After all, she knew exactly how quickly everything could be taken away. "Come back to bed," Lorenzo murmured against her hair. Celeste smiled and let him lead her inside. Outside, the city was waking up, the ordinary world going about its ordinary business. But in here, in their private world, there was only the two of them. It was more than enough. If you loved Celeste and Lorenzo's story of betrayal, revenge, and unexpected love, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment and tell me your favorite moment. Was it when she faced Terrence in Minnesota, the proposal on the Amalfi Coast, or that first electric kiss in his office? Like and share to help others discover this story. Remember, sometimes the person who picks you up from rock bottom turns out to be the love of your life. Until next time, stay strong and keep believing in love that surprises you. Ciao, Bella.